The flat-out falsehoods that Donald Trump employed to stay in power were front and center this week. On Tuesday, the House January 6 Select Committee showed how Trump's words were powerful enough to radicalize some of his supporters, how a single tweet might have been enough to accelerate their perceptions to cause chaos in Washington, and the panel compiled videos of hard-right commentators citing Trump's very own words.
President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
We're going to only be saved by millions of Americans moving to Washington, occupying the entire area, if necessary, storming right into the Capitol.
And once those supporters were in D.C., President Trump went to great lengths to whip them up into a frenzy, making last-minute changes and ad-libs to his January 6th speech. And according to the committee, Trump's speech edits turned one reference to Mike Pence into 8. And those 8 references were not very kind towards his vice president. In fact, when Trump referenced 4 times to rallygoers that they should march onto the Capitol, there had not been 4 references in the original script. And when Trump said that he would march with them to the Capitol, that wasn't in the script at all. We know where President Trump's words led. It led to his radicalized supporters carrying out a bloody attack on the very seat of our democracy. Trump's words were influential enough to lead to the violence, but they were also powerful enough to finally stop it. In fact, here's what one Capitol rioter, Stephen Ayers, told the committee on Tuesday.
The president issued at 4:17 a tweet, I believe, that included a video telling people to go home. Did you see that, and did that have any effect on what you were doing?
Well, when we were there, as soon as that come out, everybody started talking about it, and it seemed like it started to disperse, some of the crowd. Obviously, once we got back to the hotel room, we seen that it was still going on, but it definitely dispersed a lot of the crowd.
And did you leave at that point?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we left.
So, in other words, that was the key moment when you decided to leave, when President Trump told people to go home.
Yeah, we left right when that come out.
That's all it took to calm the riot. One video message from the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Now just imagine for a moment if it had been delivered hours earlier, before anyone was killed or hurt. Imagine even that Trump stopped spreading his big lie after that bloody day. Of course he didn't. He still does. Here's what Stephen Ayers and former Oath Keeper Jason Van Tatenhove told the committee about Trump's ongoing claims about 2020.
President Trump is still promoting the big lie about the election. How does that make you feel?
It makes me mad, because I was hanging on every word he was saying. Everything he was putting out, I was following it. Who knows what the next election could come out? They could end up being down the same path we are right now.
I do fear for this next election cycle, because who knows what that might bring. If a president that's willing to try to instill and encourage to whip up a civil war amongst his followers using lies and deceit and snake oil, and regardless of the human impact, what else is he going to do if he gets elected again?
Stephen Ayers and Jason Van Tatenhove may have been able to escape this powerful force, but it's still going strong with thousands of others in this country. And with Trump potentially running for president again in just 2 short years, what can be done to break his radical spell before 2024? Joining me now to discuss this and more is Ruth Ben-Ghiat, author of Strongmen: From Mussolini to the Present, publisher of Lucid, a newsletter on threats to democracy, and a professor of history and Italian studies at New York University, and I would argue one of the busiest people in America with all these threats that our democracy is facing. Ruth, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We heard Capitol rioter Stephen Ayers testify that he hung on Trump's every word. How does one man become such a commanding figure in the minds of so many followers that probably don't ever come into personal contact with this person?
Yeah, well, Trump worked really hard at forming his leader cult. And I don't like it when people say that Trump was incompetent or lazy, because the things he cared about, like having a leader cult and having loyalty of millions of people who would do whatever he asked and give him money and all that, he worked super hard at that. So, you know, it's very important if we think about January 6th that he used rallies since 2015 to get to ordinary people and radicalize them and build bonds with them, telling him he loved them. And, you know, he also used his rallies to change the way people viewed violence. And so there were the extremists like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, but then there were all the regular people like Ayers who were radicalized online, but also at rallies where he said, you know, in the old days, we used to be able to beat up people. We can't do that anymore. Or he offered to pay legal fees for people who beat up protesters and might get in trouble. So he conscientiously, systematically used his rallies to like incubate violence and loyalty to himself for 5 years. And we see the outcome of this on January 6th.
Ruth, you've spent a lot of time studying strongmen. Trump has lied so many times, lost so many lawsuits, and yet people still follow him despite the fact that he gets caught in these lies. Are there any historic parallels to something like this? Other strongmen who fail so often and still somehow maintain their powerful image and persevere in being able to attract millions of followers?
Yeah, there are. And I mean, once they have enough power to make sure that, you know, hearings and investigations like the one we have now can never happen, then they can do whatever they want. But their personality cults are important. And the party, the GOP, is part of that, to make them seem infallible and make them seem all powerful. And they're going to be the savior of the nation. And really, the only thing that starts to deflate the personality cult is either when they finally, you know, drive the country into ruin, or something happens to them, like with Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, or, you know, they get prosecuted. And so in a democracy, Berlusconi in Italy had a similar personality cult, and so many corruption trials, so much fraud and tax fraud and corruption of every sort. And the only thing that got rid of his personality cult was when he was finally prosecuted after he left office.
I wanted to ask you whether you believe there is a lie, a failure, a slip-up that would actually cause Trump to lose his sway with voters. I mean, to some extent, and I know it's kind of anecdotal, recently he was afraid to even use the word vaccine because his base has become so anti-vax, and he wanted to take credit for it. He couldn't help but try to take credit for the vaccine, but he doesn't even want to mention the word when he goes to his rallies and to talk about his accomplishments and achievements as president.
Yes, that he can box himself into a corner in that way. I think, you know, unfortunately, what happens with radicalization and cult and, you know, leader cults is that there's a phase at which the cult starts to dissipate and maybe the leader is less popular. And it leads some people to dig in more than ever because they become afraid that they were wrong, and they feel ashamed that they were wrong. And so they sometimes cling all the more to this leader cult and this leader. But things are very dynamic because there are people who are now backing DeSantis. You know, not everybody said they're going to vote for Trump or give him the nomination. So we're going to see what happens. And I think one very important point is to have people understand that the people he fleeced were not the Democrats, but his own followers. And the last email for his non-existent election defense fund went out to, you know, his devoted followers a half an hour before January 6th. So those were the people in classic fashion. The strongman despises most the people who he dupes. And if that can be made clear, that sometimes gets people to wake up.